I have been misgendered 3 times in the past 24 hours at restaurants. Last night I was at Benihana with my girlfriend and the server said, "What about you, sir? What would you like to eat?" My girlfriend, God bless her heart, steps in, says, "Actually, that's ma'am." And she looks at my girlfriend and didn't really understand what had happened and said, "No, I'm talking to him," pointing at me. Our jaws were on the floor and we decided to leave because it was just a bad vibe after that. And just a few minutes ago, I was at another restaurant for lunch and they showed me my seat and said, "Here you go, sir." And I said, "I am not a sir." And then I left because I wasn't comfortable anymore. And I went to a new restaurant and I asked, "Before I sit down, where's the bathroom, please?" And they said, "Oh, it's right this way, sir." And I just left because I wasn't comfortable anymore. If you're a server in the food industry, you don't need to use words like sir or ma'am. There are ways to be respectful without using those words. And if you get it wrong for someone like me, I will probably leave the restaurant. And it puts like a bad vibe on my day when it happens, especially when it happens 3 times in a row.
A large part of why trans issues remain a point of contention is not because the wider world is obsessed with trans people, as many like to claim, but because of the odd fixation on including children in the issue. Educating children on transgenderism seems to be a main goal of many trans rights activists, and while one can argue that diversity should be taught to children, gender identity is not a topic that should be included any more than we should expose children to other misogynistic ideas while presenting them as fact.
People think that I'm not really a girl, but I am a girl. I'm 10. When I was younger, I just didn't feel right and everything felt wrong. I saw girls with hairbrushes and Barbies and them having cool long hair. I'm like, ooh, I want that hair. I'd like that dress. I knew that I wanted to be a girl and I was a girl, but I didn't really know what to say or how to say it, or if it was true. I remember this day, I was playing with my big sister. We were playing a game and something felt wrong and I just said to her, "I'm a girl and that's who I am." It made me feel kind of nervous that people wouldn't accept me for who I was because they've always known me as a boy. My friends and my family were very acceptant and I don't know if they really knew what I was going through. I want them to see me as a proud transgender girl, but not always to think, "Oh, you're trans," but to say, "I'm a girl and that's who I am and that's who I will always be." I'll be on puberty blockers soon and that's just going to be pausing really my body from growing into what I don't want it to be. I am who I want to be. I can do what I want to do. If someone's trying to say, "No, you can't," I'm not related to that person. I'm not they're not me. They don't know how I feel and who I want to be.
After all, gender ideology posits that stereotypes are the definition of being male or female, and thus teaching children who are still in the process of learning how society functions and their role within it are easily misled to believe that their normal human variations in personality and personal tastes means that they are in the wrong body and need to identify as something other than what they are. These simplistic explanations many trans children give when describing why they identify as such reveals that many are simply gender nonconforming or potentially homosexual. However, while they likely would not have gender dysphoria or might desist if left alone, social transitioning often leads to children undergoing medical treatment that can severely impact their futures through sterilization or other detrimental side effects.
This may upset some of you, but there are more and more studies coming out that prove puberty blockers are not in fact reversible. Obviously, some people are thinking this is a great way to cope with kids having anxiety going through puberty and being uncomfortable in their bodies, But the reality is that puberty blockers suppress estrogen and testosterone, which are hormones that help develop the reproductive system, but also affect the bones, the brain, and other parts of the body. Some doctors are claiming that children will simply snap back and regain their bone strength once they stop the blockers, but evidence is suggesting that many do not fully rebound and lag behind their peers. Unfortunately, this is something a lot of people are going to have to learn the hard way. The professionals don't know everything. Sometimes they're misinformed. There's such a thing as malpractice. They misdiagnose. It happens. Teaching kids to cope with their own discomfort in their bodies by changing everything is not healthy. This is chemical castration. It's a crime. This is the lobotomy of our generation.
It's likely that many trans rights activists have recognized that pushing on this boundary not only begets them attention, but allows them to feel like a progressive civil rights activist, and thus feel as if they're better than others, or likely to be looked back upon as before their time. For example, controversial trans influencer Lily Tino is well known for his videos which seem to exist purely as rage bait.
I'm dating someone who turned their cake pops into a donut. This donut is breaking, but you get it. She's about 6 months out from surgery, and she's at the point where she can comfortably serve her donut. And the process of figuring things out has been a lot of fun for both of us. Her donut can feel a pretty wide range of sensations, but it'll be a few more months before she can cross the finish line. But even now, her donut looks and feels incredible. You'd have a tough time knowing it was ever a cake pop to begin with. I can also confirm that the donut does self-glaze, though sometimes we add a little bit of extra glaze just to be sure. And since the donut hole is a little bit on the smaller side right now, extra glaze can be helpful as we work up to getting a full cake pop stick to fit inside. Most importantly, she doesn't regret getting her donut for a second. She's finally comfortable in her body, and that's a beautiful thing. I'm still not sure if I want to get a donut, but experiencing it secondhand through her has been very helpful.
He's angered those on both sides of the aisle for his videos copying Miss Rachel, a prominent children's educator / entertainer, for talking about various surgeries in public and with childish analogies, as well as for posting these alongside adult-themed content, as he advertises his OnlyFans quite openly.
Hi friends! Today we're going to talk about something super important, what it means to be transgender. It's a big word, but I promise that it's easy to understand. Ready to learn? The first thing I want you to do is close your eyes. Now think, do you feel like a boy, a girl, or a little bit of both? Do you have your answer? Great. Now I want you to imagine that everyone keeps telling you that you're something else, even though in your heart you know who you are. Wouldn't that make you sad inside? People who feel like this are transgender. And if you're not transgender, it's super easy to be friends with someone who is. Let's take our imaginary friend Theo, for example. One day you notice that Theo starts wearing girl clothes instead of boy clothes, and then they tell you that they want to be called Luna instead of Theo. This is so exciting for our friend Luna because they finally get to be their true self. And if you accidentally call Luna by the
While one might have patience or be willing to ignore discussion of so-called gender-affirming surgeries, it's much harder to have tolerance when content is catered to children alongside adult content, when content for children is created specifically to mimic legitimate child content creators, and especially so when the language used is obviously for a younger audience. Another example of this can be seen in Big Mouth, an adult cartoon which, despite its raunchy humor and sexual content, often includes lectures about topics like menstruation and sexuality. If it were catered to adults looking back at their own experiences growing up, there would be no need to lecture. After all, adults already know about periods, erections, and sex. While it's true that even if it cut out this content, it would likely attract a young audience simply because adult cartoons tend to do that, the misinformation and obvious grooming within the show are what makes it especially insidious. In one case, an 8th grade boy discovers that he's asexual, because unlike his peers who were already interested in and having sex and having masturbating and being gross, he's not interested. Well, obviously. A 12-year-old is on the cusp of puberty and has not yet fully sexually developed. In fact, many children of that age group are not ready or interested in sex, which is normal. Presenting a lack of interest as proof of asexuality is a brick in the wall of sexualizing children and young teens and normalizing sexual behavior where they otherwise would not have been interested.
See, when I was younger, everyone told me that when I found the right person, it would click. So I was a true hoe.
Really?
I tried everything. Being straight, bi, very gay, demisexual, pansexual.
Ooh, you're like Dennis Rodman.
But after all that, I found that asexual is what works for me.
Asexual. You guys know what that is?
No, it's when someone feels little to no sexual attraction for other people.
There's nothing wrong with me. Maybe I'm just asexual?
If that's what you feel right now, then that's what you are right now.
Yeah, but Auntie Amber, I don't want to have to break up with my girlfriend.
You don't have to. Being asexual doesn't mean you have to be alone. I love so many people, and so many people love me. I just don't want to pork them.
And
Big Mouth normalizes children having an interest in and participating in sex, and amongst a climate where pedophilia is becoming increasingly normalized, it's not a valueless act to tell children and have child characters participate in polyamory, to normalize casual sexual encounters, or to present identities as a normal and common experience. And it's not just social media influencers and questionable Netflix shows. Transformers Earthspark has non-binary characters. Dead End Paranormal Park has a gay and trans character. Ridley Jones is a character come out as non-binary in Season 3, all of which are targeted to younger children. The question arises, why cater these messages to children? Some argue that it's all in the name of tolerance and diversity, and of course blame homosexual and bisexual people for these messages. While socialization means that heterosexuality and gender roles are taught from near birth, this does not give an excuse to offer age inappropriate material to counter it to children. Content can be catered to the age group it's meant for, such as merely having same-sex couples in the background of cartoons for young kids, thus illustrating that exceptions to the male-female schema that children otherwise pick up on exist. Older kids can simply be told, some people date the same sex. There is no need to go into detail on how people have intercourse, as it's been well established that exposing children to porn results in detriments to their mental health. Nor is there any need to teach them that being an individual makes them super-duper special or different or better than their peers, and thus able to identify as something completely different. Other shows simply have gay people as characters, often without commentary, such as how Doc McStuffins, The Bravest Knight, or Chip and Potato, all aimed at preschoolers and kindergarten-age children, have same-sex couples as parents. This differs from the inclusion of non-binary, asexual, or pansexual identities, which pathologize normal human behavior and teach children to view those around them in terms of stereotypes. The result of impressionable kids being told that she/her doesn't feel right, or that girl toys and clothes don't make me happy, is that they will conflate those stereotypes of being female itself, instead of learning that being a boy or a girl does not limit them in their hobbies, behaviors, or clothes. The result of kids seeing that homosexuality exists is that they know it exists. As noted in a systematic literature review on the topic, first, twin studies in genome scans and behavioral genetics research unveil strong biological roots of sexual orientation and identity that will not change through inclusive sexuality education. Second, psychological and sociological research signals that heteronormativity, homosexuality non-acceptance, and negative attitudes towards LGBT people in general are associated with lower levels of education and intelligence, as well as higher levels of religious belief and political conservatism. For at-risk sexual minority students who show gender nonconforming and gender atypical behavior, schools can create a safe climate and protect adolescents' health if they succeed in reducing homophobic and transphobic discrimination, bullying, peer victimization, and verbal, physical, and sexual abuse. Third, action research and ethnographic narratives in educational research tend to indicate that queer educators as role models in classrooms do not change the sexual orientation and gender identity of their pupils. On the other hand, there have been many theories and ongoing research illustrating the contagious nature of gender identities throughout peer groups. Similarly to an eating disorder, transgender or non-binary identification can rapidly appear after exposure to a peer or mentor figure who identifies as such.
There's definitely a social contagion aspect to this. I used to bounce from friend group to friend group because I didn't know what it meant to build emotionally healthy connections with people, and they would be like, oh, what is transgender? I never heard of this before. And I would explain, like, I'm born in the wrong body, because that's what I believed. And, very quickly, someone else would take their internal struggles, take this new framing that I showed them, and be like, I think I'm trans. now we're in a climate where people are like, you know, trying to suggest to people that this is the case. But at the time, I'm just like, probably not. This is a hell of a road. You do not want to go down this road if you do not have to, like, unless you really are, because it's just miserable. And so I remember trying to push people away from this path, because, you know, it's when you really are convinced of these things, you can't change your body. It's really just this relay race of denying objective reality and denying biology.
This is in part due to the feeling of specialness that such identification causes a person to be treated with, but also because the definitions for these identities are broad and ill-defined, and thus prone to being like astrology. It allows anyone to identify as anything as a result, and in fact encourages one to be so self-introspective as to become disconnected from reality. In children who are still learning to categorize, it often leads to a misunderstanding that becomes difficult to walk back from later on. The only conceivable point of flooding children's media with trans and sexuality messages is for the purpose of indoctrination. After all, without a new generation of trans-identified children, there is no continuation of gender ideology. Those who have already bought in are coming to their senses and detransitioning, or outright dying due to the surgeries and hormone use. Otherwise, they make a poor illustration of a group we are meant to pity, as children are far more sympathetic victims than the average trans woman. But like a vegan cat, it is really the choice of the child to identify as such, either led by the media or their parents. It is indoctrination to hear children chase the same few definitions. It's like drowning, I'm in the wrong body, boy toys and girl toys. These stories all blend together. It seems unlikely that such a narrative would remain the same and stay to such a similar script if it was really so natural. This, dear viewers, is where we part. So, this started with, I like watching really, really long YouTube videos to fall asleep. There's been quite a few gossipy ones that kind of get in there, so my YouTube will automatically go from, we're coming back from the Transformers to, I'm going to tell you about this influencer on TikTok. And so I unfortunately, and against my will, sometimes learn about these things. I've covered Lily a little bit in the past, but what reminded me about this was just going through so many cartoons, so many, like in the past, just thinking about how often in the past, I guess 10 years, I've noticed trans characters, trans narratives, and other gender identities, very niche ones specifically, get the limelight in media, and not just media for adults. I mean, for adults it's annoying, but at least then it's like, ugh, and then you just kind of ignore it and move on. But for children aren't critically examining the content they're watching. And as someone who watches cartoons, as a cartoon enjoyer, I've noticed that, especially in my beloved Transformers, the inclusion of this stuff, which is always very unnatural, it's always very stilted, it's always very stereotypical. And it brings me back when I was in high school, right? I actually had a pretty big Voltron blog. I was super into that fandom. I threw parties for every season release. And I remember I had a post, I scrolled back to the start of my Tumblr one day, and I found a post where I was like ranting, and I'm like, I don't know, 15 or 16, about how I was so annoyed of people calling Pidge non-binary. Like, there's only 2 girls on the team, and the other one, Allura, basically did nothing for most of the show. And I was very frustrated with, you have one girl who's not like sexualized or treated as like a crush character, who's just like a normal character who happens to be female, and you gotta make her non-binary. That's like female erasure. This is years before I ever came to think of this in a political sense. And I've just realized more and more recently that this is way more common than it should be. I can't say that I had the best taste when I was watching Big Mouth in high school, but I was planning on doing a review on it at some point, and as I was going through it again, and I was like looking at it, and who is this for? Why are you educating about pansexuality and asexuality and gender fluidity and all this stuff, especially when this is not really for kids, and if it's not for kids, then you don't need to lecture to adults, so who's it for? And Anyhow, one of those things that very much got on my nerves. And when I complained about sexuality and gender issues in this video, I just want to make it clear that what I'm talking about is the made up sexualities. All the ones that are basically just nonsensical. I think there's no issue with telling children, Lisa has 2 mommies, or you can marry a girl or a boy when you grow up. Simple. It's not indoctrination to tell them the possibility of homosexuality existing, because you can't actually change sexuality. You can influence someone into changing their gender identity, as many people have done, as we can see through detransitioners, and that's where my issue lies. Anyhow, if you guys have any comments, questions, or concerns, let me know in the comment section down below, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.